Hi everyone, my name's Bob Chell and I'm the Chief Product Officer at 1Spatial. Now at 1Spatial we've got over a dozen development teams split across two areas really. We've got half of our dev teams based in the UK in Cambridge and we focus a lot on our data management tools, and we've also got half the team based in France where we build a lot of Esri based solutions, particularly in the utility space. So we've got a lot of familiarity with things like the utility network model and migrations that we do there, which I know we've talked about previously. What I'd like to do is, for the next little while, is give you a little bit more of a deep dive view into the products that we were talking about previously. So if you want to have a play around and trial with them, you'll know what to expect. But I'll spend the first maybe 10 minutes just giving you a little overview about why we do what we do at 1Spatial, how we build our products, what techniques we might use as we create them or as we deliver different solutions using those different products and technology. And hopefully they'll give you some tips and things that you can take back to your own organisations to help you do what you do and improve. Sure. So the first thing I'd like us to quickly talk about is not just the products that we've got and we build and how you might build your own business cases to decide what you invest in and where you spend your people time. And there's some of the nice, I guess, methods you could use around, really thinking about why you do what you do, the Simon Sinek model about, inside out sort of positioning of things. And another model that really resonated with me a lot recently is the CIA model. So control and influence and accepting what goes on. So in everything that we do, we choose different products and partners that we want to work with, which is a way that we can control what's going to happen next in everything that we're doing. That then might influence what decisions we take, the guidance that we do, the results that might come back from those systems. There's things that will influence what happens next. But particularly on data engineering programs, at some point we actually need to accept the facts are what they are. The facts are the facts. If the data is not of the right quality levels, we need to understand how we want to deal with it or how we want to manage the risk of that data not being at the level that we want. So I think it's a nice way to think through that, things we do have that we can control. There will be things outside of our control which we can help influence, but there's also going to be areas of the solutions that we build. We really need to accept what's going on and the facts behind them are the facts. So the advantages and the way we build a lot of our solutions, this rules-based approach that we talk about, I think there's three areas of where a rules-based approach has a really good fit: validating data, correcting data, and even transforming it. And I'll come on to that a little bit more in a few slides' time. But really, the rules-based approach is a great way of automating things. It's what we've seen a lot of in the presentations up till now. That whole way of building our routines so they can be automated. The automation gives us that repeatability. And I think something else we need to really carefully consider is the traceability of those automation routines. So how do we know that they're doing the right thing, or when we've changed them, have we changed them for a positive reason? So making sure we've got a really nice evidence-based trail to show that we've changed things, we've measured whether it's an improvement or not, and that's why we adopted and accepted that change into our flow. And making sure we can do that in a nice collaborative way. We're passing information around through systems that don't necessarily need you to be a programmer, or no code sort of approaches. That I think will come across and show you why we pair up a lot of the technology products that we build ourselves. I'm going to show you one integrator, one data gateway, and then the third-party products that we resell as well. Now this flow, I think, and especially in the GIS space when we're dealing with lots of data-related problems that we need to solve, we are naturally very lean and agile in what we do. So if we start by setting out really understanding the data that we've got to deal with and understanding, is it fit for purpose at this stage or does it need some improvement? But we're pretty good with the tools that we choose, particularly with the tech stacks that we've been talking about today, that building them in a nice automated and repeatable way, we can choose to chunk up our problems in lots of different ways. We could take a slice through all the data layers that we need to work on in a particular geographical region if we want, or we could just take a national scale approach to look at issues and maybe pick a certain couple of data layers to test out our ideas. And I think we've got that flexibility to work out, to choose the right approach for the type of problem that we've got to currently deal with. And the tech stacks that we work on, I mentioned that half of my dev teams spend all their time building solutions on top of the Esri stack, particularly around the utility network model. And there's great integration points between all the tech stacks and the software companies that we choose to partner with. And we use those different components, sometimes with our own products, to build the right end solutions for users. So UN migration projects, we've got certain technology that we'd use, and we've integrated really nicely and in an elegant way to deliver, the really high quality solutions for people. The same is true for whether we were picking the FME technology stack as well. The integration points between the third-party products in both directions, so calling one technology from another, integrating them and vice versa, it's all such an elegant way to pair up different technology to build the right solution. Now, 3 areas that I also challenge the product and solution teams on all the time is, once we've built a good functioning system, have we thought about simplifying and minimizing the amount of data that we're moving around the system? So because the data is moving, that moving part means there's always a little risk around some error creeping in, or some data duplication, or something outside our control happens, like the network goes down, which means we end up with corrupted data files, or a system is changing the data in a way we weren't quite expecting. So really trying to minimize and simplify how much data we pass through systems is an important way to just minimize that risk. Also, everything we build, whether that's connections to databases, business rules, plugging and playing data and rules into different workflows, separating out all those concerns and making sure we can test them all individually is really important for building robust solutions. And the API access that we talked about previously is also another nice way of joining them up, but keeping the different software components separated, so we know that they all work in a robust way in their own individual way, and that they will work when we bring them together into delivering our final or critical type systems. But in order for that to work, we need to make sure that everything we build and create is designed with testability and reuse in it at the beginning. And that's important, and we've seen that in some of the stories around the solutions people have built at the moment, where we might want to test everything at every stage. Testing data as it goes in and out of transformers, testing our business rules as we change them and we make improvements. We're doing them and making those improvements in a positive way. So 3 areas where our rules engine is really well suited. There's the sort of classic validation routines, that quality assurance task of, I have some SLAs, or I've got some legal requirements, or a specification that my data should match. So can I go through and QA it to make sure that it does meet the right levels that have been set in terms of data validation? It makes sense as well, though, particularly in the GI space, that if we can write the logic and the business rules to find issues, we can probably write some corrective routines in the same rules-based way. So it's a nice, repeatable, non-subjective correction action that we could use to automate that cleansing challenge. And the third area is, usually when we've brought all this data together, and again in the GIS space, everyone gets really quite creative about spotting the patterns or the missing patterns that they can or cannot see in the data once it's been brought into one location. So actually using the data that's available to transform it into something completely new, or create missing data where we can see there are gaps, but we know some of our data assets exist, becomes really quite an innovative way of improving what we've got. Now, the products I'll talk to you about, all the actual documentation for these is online, nothing is gated, nothing's hidden away from anybody, and there's lots of tech blogs and articles on the 1Spatial website under news and events that you can find that will tell you about what we do and why we do it, the sort of standards we use and the approaches we adopt as we're putting our products together. And if you're going to have a look at the platform products that we're happy to give everybody access to, the 2 primary ones we'll look at is 1Integrate and 1Data Gateway, all completely web-based applications. From a trial perspective, will exist in the cloud. They've been built in a cloud-first way. And actually what we've got on offer for everybody is just to come and try the solutions out for 30 days. No need for any credit cards. You don't need to download any software at all. So that might ease any challenges you might have around your IT teams. And you actually get access to some extra gated content, which is a lot of self-paced online training content, which you can use to step your way through the actual products and then try them out yourselves with your own data in your own scenarios. You don't need, because of the cloud-based aspect to it, you don't need to worry about the scalability. From a trial perspective, we will ask a couple of questions up front about what you might use the system for, so we can make sure we size it in the right way. And under the sort of trial agreement, we also don't want you necessarily processing national data sets or huge volumes of data. It's going to be more based on making sure you're using the system in a way to test things out, and then if you move into production because you want to kind of develop the solutions for real, then we'd make sure we size the environments in the right way for you to get access to that. The other really nice thing from a services point of view is when you want to process the data, if you get stuck at any point, any of our teams can quickly jump online, have a look at what you've done, give you some guidance on what to change or what you might need to improve to get some better performance. And with all the solutions, you'll be able to see we can drop in little comments into the actual applications themselves. So next time you get in, you'll be able to see what we've changed or why we've changed it or what suggestions we might be making. So quick area playtime. Let's see what all these solutions look like. Now we'll be showing you 1Integrate version 4, and in the last year that's gone through a lot of big changes. V4 is our last major release. So we've really put a lot of effort into improving the map viewer that sits behind this product, and I'll explain that when we walk you through the products in a demo in a second. We've improved how we can drag and drop in lots of different comments. So again, that can help us in a collaborative way when we're sharing ideas or guiding you on the best way to build things. The business rules we build, so the way we design and the drag and drop interface we have behind the business rules is a big change from the previous user experience behind rule building. But we've also added a really nice feature to help you debug the rules as well. So you can step through each of the logical parts of the business rule, see what the data looks like in that scenario, and start to learn about why certain features may have passed or failed each of the business rules. So a really big productivity gain there, which has been a nice big tech improvement that we've made. And also not forgetting the sort of admin side of the process as well, especially as we've moved into the cloud and the product's designed to scale up and scale down and sort of self-look after itself to meet the demand that you have. So having a much nicer user experience behind the administration has become really important for us. So the scenario I'm going to step through and I want to walk through with everybody is basically built around the training data that we give you access. This is an example of the source data set that you'll see when you log into the system. So the training data that we've got, there's lots of point, line, polygon-based data, different zones, and these will take you through the different examples and little test scenarios we have in the training exercises. One of the things we'll focus on here is there's some point-based data relating to fire stations in this instance, but really the points have just got things about them. They have a location attribute, they know what they are, so they're part of the fire department here. The buildings have attribution as well that tells us what type of buildings they are, whether they're residential, commercial, fire stations. There's a road network, and the road network also has attribution around the names of roads. And there are some links between all these data sets like we'd expect in the real world. So again, looking back at the fire stations, their location attribute contains some of the information around, and also their site name around a relationship that it has with the road. And in the scenario, we've got the 5 different fire stations. As we just quickly look around the bookmarks that we've got set up here, you can see where they are in relation to all the other data sets. And this is the information we use in the exercises to make sure we can improve what we've got and what we do and how we do it. So that gives you a little bit of the context about the data that we're going to work through in these examples. Now we've taken a look at some of the data, let's have a look at the concepts behind 1Integrate, so you understand what's going on as we go through the different demos. So the way we organize everything within 1Integrate is we have data stores, and here we're looking at the data store to do with the training data. We can see the config of that, which is it's basically a zipped up set of shape files. There's all sorts of different types of data stores we could use to bring information into our rules engine to do some processing. And once we connect to those data stores, we get a quick view of all the classes or the layers that are listed in there, and all their attributes. And we've always got the ability to add in descriptions and comments about those data stores, and also on the traceability side to see when they were last edited, who edited them and created them, and then where they are used in other parts of the workflow. The data stores are separate to the rule building interface. So this is the canvas we would use to design our rules. Again, we can see where those rules might be used, who created them, when they were last updated, add descriptions and comments in general to those rules, and then design them and build them in the interface. I'll show you actions later, which is very similar to the rule builder canvas. And then we plug and play the data we want to process with the business rules into what we call a session. So almost every session we'll start with an open data operation where we bring data in, then we'll run some rules to check the data, and then the session will complete. At each step, we can have a look at what happened. We can get a high-level view of how many features were processed, how many non-conformances were generated. We could drill down into a more detailed report of that. So if we wanted to find out some more information about, in this case, the 3 fire stations that failed the rule, we can download the results as a CSV file if we want to pass them back to people. And there's also a map view application, a map viewer, which will allow us to jump in at that particular step in the workflow and actually navigate around and have a look at some of the features that have been identified as not conforming the business rules. So here for this particular report, we can zoom to the first fire station record and have a look at it and say, is the business rule identifying the right types of issues in the data? Did we get our rule right? So we're making sure we've got some evidence that shows us the rules we're developing is highlighting the right thing. So at each stage, we're trying to give the users all the right tools and all the right features to access things, pretty much a button click. There's also the admin side of what we're doing, putting the application into light and dark mode. But really, all this is to make the way you use the system such a nice, memorable experience, making sure that it's nice and consistent with all the applications that we've got. When we're building out our sessions, we can stop and start them at any point in time. As soon as we hit the play button, it's going to grab the latest data from those data sources, process the information in the right way. We can rewind different steps, step back a few elements in our workflow that we're building, always quite important when we're designing the workflows in the first place, and then change our rules or our definitions if we want, play out the session again, check out the results and build up a real nice audit history and a nice evidence-based chain to make sure whenever we make changes or do anything to the system, we know what the impact of those changes are at any point. So it's a nice flexible way of working. There's always the links back from from a traceability perspective to any of the rules that you have a look at or data stores in those sessions. One click and it sends you to the actual rule definition. So a nice, fast, elegant way of moving around the actual user interface. And it gives us that traceability. Like I said, you can see where that rule is used. So in this case, it's used in a particular session that we have and jump back to that session. So we've got a real nice tight handle on the traceability of how everything is in sync and is used within the system. So now we understand the data and we understand some of the concepts behind the product. Let's think about building our first rule. So all the rules we create will always be about something. And in this case, we're going to write a rule about a fire station. We've also got context, as you can see in the top right, that'll mean it points at the data store we defined earlier. So all the drop lists will allow us to pretty much build these rules without typing anything in. They'll always be using those classes and attributes help us design the rule. So what we're going to build here is for all the fire stations to have a business rule to see are they good quality fire stations. We're going to test whether there exists a building where the fire station geometry is within the building geometry. So quite a simple point in polygon type test, but a good way to start working out, is this fire station data something we can trust and use in all our different solutions. So here we build an existence check that says check that, the fire station geometry, and then we're going to look for a spatial relationship, which we choose within. We want to make sure that fire station geometry is within the building geometry. So we'll select that from the drop list because the context is enabled, and the rule is always trying to help you choose what to do next to build a nice valid rule. So here we go, we can see what the operation is going to try and do, and we're trying to make a positive statement about the data. So for this to be a good fire station, we're not going to find all the issues where fire stations are not in buildings. The rule is going to state that for this to be a good fire station, a positive statement, there should exist at least one building where the fire station is within the building. And if that statement is true, if the data matches that pattern, we know we're in a good shape and we've got a good feature to process. So now you've got the concepts, we know about the data, and we've seen how we can build a business rule. Let's have a look at how it all fits together and how I'd encourage people to use the tool to build a real world-class rules-based validation routine using some of the principles we talked about earlier. So here's the first thing I do in building out my session to build that rules-based process. First thing we always want to do is add some data, bring in a data store that we want to process. And as we build out and design our workflow, we can add pause statements, so we can rewind and play and kind of make sure everything is happening in the right order at our own pace. So here we've accessed the data. I can have a quick look at the data, quick map view inspection of is this the data what I was expecting from the data source that I loaded in. And I can see I'm okay with that. Next thing I then might want to do is actually have a look at the business rules. Here's the rule we looked at earlier. Check that a fire station is within a building. So I've got my rule built out. And then what I can do is go back to my session and drop that business rule into my session. So here I'll use the check rules operation. I'll find the rule that I'm interested in, drop that into the flow, and then in this instance, just add another pause statement so my session doesn't complete before I'm ready, and run through and process the data. And here we can see there's one problem feature. So 83% of the data was good. There's one record that has a problem with it. If I go and have a look at the report and actually zoom to that first feature, here I can see quite easily that the point isn't inside the building, so it makes sense that that record has failed the business check. But we also know that if I rewind that session, we've got more things we could use to check and just actually confirm that this is a good fire station record. So what I'm going to do here is keep a nice audit history of a new version of the rule. So I duplicate the rule, give it a different name. So I'll increase the version number because I know that the building data also has a description, an attribute that tells me what type of building it is. So when I do the existence check to see what the relationship is between the fire stations and the buildings, I'm now going to do two things. I want to check that the geometry is within the building, but also check that the attribute name, so the building type attribute, this time not a spatial operation, but a scalar one. I want to make sure that that equals fire station, so a constant value. So that should be the test that we want to perform. So I'll save that rule away. This is now a slightly more improved version of that rule check that we can run against the data. Now, in order to test whether I'm making improvements or making sure that I've got some evidence to support the changes I'm making to my rule catalog, I can just run the rules side by side and really quickly see what's happening. So here, as I add an extra constraint into the rule, it might make sense that the conformance level goes down, but hopefully for a good reason, because we want to find and identify what the issues are. Here we can see the point is inside the building, but if I select the building to the west, that's where the fire station is. And the same in this example. If I select the building to the south, you can see that that is actually the fire station, and then our original problem. the fire station that wasn't even in a building to start with. So the conformance rate going down kind of makes sense. But now I know it's also got the street data, so we don't know what this data will be used for. Maybe having the correct address information as well as it being in the right location, in the right type of building is important. So here I'm going to do the same thing, create a new version of the rule that I'm going to expand out. And here I'm going to do two types of existence checks. So another logical AND statement. So I want to check that the existence with the buildings is good, and we've got that part of the check. But then I also want to do something very similar and do an existence check again, but this time actually making sure that there is at least one. And I'm going to now bring in the road class because I want to check that there's a road within a certain distance of the actual fire station feature. So here I'm going to say, okay, I want to make sure that the fire station geometry is spatially within a certain distance. So that's one of the spatial operators that we've got. So here we'll put in a distance of 50 meters. So let's make sure that that fire station point geometry is within 50 meters of the road geometry. So that might be the type of test that we want to introduce at this level. Now there's also two elements to this check that we can do, a bit like the existence above, because not only do we want to make sure that the fire station is within 50 meters of a road, we want to make sure that it's the right road according to the attribution in the data set. So here I actually know that the fire station location attribute, there's an attribute called location, and it's that attribute that's got the road name description in it. So as well as the spatial check taking place, I want to make sure that the location attribute contains the road name. So the road should be within 50 meters and the attributes should match up. So that's a sort of further enhanced improvement to the business rule. So again, same principles apply. I can jump back to my session that I've got, bring in my new rule, so the new rule that I've introduced, actually drop that into the flow, play that through, and then have some evidence to say what's happening now to the conformance levels of my data. So sometimes this is a challenge for the QA teams and the users of the data, where as we improve the rule, the conformance level is going down. But it's showing us the right type of non-conformances. But previously, we set this rule up to look for have a 50 meter sort of search radius for how we want to check the data. So it's 50 meters right. So why don't we make a copy of that rule and double the 50 meters? So again, keep a nice audit history, a nice bit of traceability in the system about all the changes we're making. Let's increase this search radius out from 50 to 100. Save that change away. And then follow exactly the same pattern again, a nice evidence-based way of dropping this new rule into the flow and seeing what impact that has. What are the changes in any of the results? Are they at what we're expecting? And is it making a positive improvement? So here, run the rules side by side, and actually the conformance level is going up again, which makes sense because we're sort of relaxing that 50 meter search constraint and doubling it up and making it 100. But why stop at 100? Again, let's take this same evidence-based approach to going through and building ourselves out a new rule. So let's duplicate that rule again. We'll rename it, double up the 100 to a 200 meter search radius. Go in and change the actual context of the rule again, just as we did previously. Nice quick operation, easy thing to do. Save that rule away and jump back into our session and follow the same pattern of adding in this quick change to the rule again. So here I'll drop in the 5th version of the rule that we've created really. So we're trying to work out how do we get the balance of the exact right rule that we need and the compromise against any of the risks or the constraints that we're dropping into that rule. And we can play that session out. So here we've actually got to a 50% conformance rate, the same conformance rate as the rule we had at version 1.5, but actually we've now got a really accurate and a better quality business rule that we can use to drop into our final session. So now that we're happy with that version of the rule, and we've got a nice evidence-based trail to say that's the right rule that we want, we can remove out all the other rules that we built along the way. We don't need to worry about all the rules are still kept in the rule catalog, they're just not used in this workflow. Test that out so we can see we can load all the data in. It quickly tells us what the issues are. And then there's lots of little tips and tricks in the product that we might use to say, well, actually, we've worked out that for this particular flow, for this particular set of business rules, we only need some of the classes. We only need buildings, fire stations, and roads. So there's no need for us to even load any of the other data. So we can minimize the amount of data that the system is passing through it. So here there's less data that we will load, so it's a bit quicker, and we can see the conformance level, but we're now really happy with the end result. Now, one of the second scenarios I talked about with the rules-based approach is actually to correct the data as well. So I'm going to give a little example about how we might be able to automate in a safe rules and logical based way the correction of some of those fire stations that we were looking at previously. So here we're going to look at some of the corrections that we want to do in the products. So here we've got our session with our fire station rule. We built it using the rule building canvas, but what I'm going to show you is an action, a corrective routine that we've got, and the actions part, same sort of look and feel and experience around the rule builder interface, but here we're looping around all the buildings that are within 200 meters of the fire station, and we've actually got a little assignment operation, so something that will assign, which is like change and update a feature. And we're going to update the fire station geometry if we find one of those buildings, and make the geometry be the result of the get point operation, which is like finding the centroid of the building. Now again, if we're going to build this out in a nice logical based way where we can trace all our steps and make sure every time we make a change, it's a positive change and one that we want to happen, then what I'm going to do is actually bring in that fix-up routine, and to start with, just drop it either side of the business rule. So if I duplicate the business rule and put the corrective routine in between the two, I can always make sure that what did the rule find and how many issues were there at the start? Does the corrective routine then make any of the changes? And then what's the business rule telling me at the end? So have I made a positive impact? And here I can see I have. Now to double check that, we can again use the map viewer and the flow that we've got. So if we go to all the different fire stations, we can see in this first example, at this stage, the point is in the building. If I have a look at the data a couple of steps previous, we can see this is the one which it wasn't in the building, but the rule has allowed us to correct and make a change to that data automatically. The same here. The new location is showing us the point is within the building on the west, whereas previously it was on the east-hand side, and we can see that it's the building on the west, which is the actual building that has got a type called fire station. So the rule has found the correct building using all the logical statements we had before and corrected it. So we can see what the change has been, so we're confident in the corrective routines that we've got. And this is the third example, where we can see actually the fire station building is the building that's to the south of the location where it was before. So that's the correct building that we want to move the data into, and we can see a nice logical way of building out those improvements. So we've seen how we can validate data, correct the things that we found during the validation. And the third example I just want to quickly share is how you might want to use the rules-based approach to completely enhance and transform the data that you've got. So in this example, what we're actually going to use is take out the corrections that we were doing previously, and we're just going to edit slightly the data store that we've got for this example, because I want to introduce and show you what we might do to make the 3D version of all the buildings that we saw previously. So we know in this data set there's actually an elevation attribute which tells us how high each of the buildings are. And what I've actually got, and then design it in the same way we had before, was if I bring that data in, but it's now in a 3D enabled state, we can actually build out some actions that would allow us to extrude out the 2D geometry into a full 3D volume, so a 3D object, and extrude the geometry using the elevation attribute. So in the same way as we had with all the other flows, we can in a logical and consistent way bring in that 3D extrude buildings operation, drop in our pause statements as we build out the flow, play that session through. So we've loaded in the data where we're interested in the buildings. That operation is now building the 3D features. And if I want to have a quick look at that data now, then the look and feel of it will have been transformed from a 2D view of the world. If I go to a couple of locations, you can start to see that all the buildings I have now are 3D. So all the tests that we've built around point in polygon analysis, things like that, they would now be performed in 3D if the data was 3D based. So we'd be making sure that a point is within the volume, not just performing a point in polygon test in a 2D way. So now I've shown you how the rules engine works and we design things that way. The second product I want to give you a little peek into is the One Data Gateway product. That's the portal application, which allows us to publish applications that people in your supply chain, your organization could use to process data using all the interesting rules we can build out in 1Integrate, but giving them a different user experience and access point so we can control users and usage and who accesses what. This is the One Data Gateway application, portal-based app. I log into the system, I get access to certain applications. All I need to do in this scenario is provide my data, just as I did in the 1Integrate product, but the whole user experience is to hide any of the details about the business rules from the user. As soon as that data file is uploaded, it gets scanned for viruses, so lots of portal-based functionality. I can have a look at how the data I provided maps into what the system is expecting. So I could tweak that if I add streets and the system was expecting roads. But then it's a simple case of playing the process, having a look at the conformance. Here we can see that the data's been loaded. Those same 3 problem fire stations have been identified as not conforming to the rules. I can have a quick look in exactly the same way and with the same user experience as 1Integrate at those issues. So here's the first fire station that has a particular problem. Here's the second problem feature, and zoom to them just to double check that what I'm actually seeing matches the business rules. So you gain a little bit of confidence that the user knows that, yeah, the rule is identifying the right invalid features. And the idea is to quickly get the user to the final step, the final submission of results, where at that stage you can download the non-conformances, get a nice report back and an audit log of these are the features that need to be corrected. And you can use all that information then to go back to some of your source systems if you don't want to get the data automatically corrected, to make the changes in a nice, simple and elegant way. Once we've got all the results together and we're happy with all that information, what we do nice and simply is just close out the submission. That'll send us back to the state we were in before, and we can come back and look at all the audit history of what we did and when. We'll kick off new submissions as and when we're ready. Now I also want to show you the admin side of One Data Gateway. So the reason we can set things up and make sure the right users have access to the right workflows is as we log in, we have the idea of, in admin mode here, user management. And those users that we connect to the system, we join up with certain suppliers. So suppliers are like the group of users and how we want to associate them. And then what we can do is, even if we're managing multiple products and different projects, for each project we can go in and give it its own style and its own theme, its own look and feel theme. But each project, under the actual specifications for it, not only do we define how long do we keep hold of data, which one integrate session is going to run in the background, what data are we going to ask the user to actually supply, or what might we fetch in the background from web feature services, things like that. But here we can jump into all the specifics about user permissions. So I can say that people who were part of the 1Spatial group, these are the ones who we're actually going to have access to that particular product. So in this scenario, I'm adding Christian to that set. And what that means is that with that one change, if Christian now logged into the One Data Gateway portal, he will actually see a new assignment in his list, which will allow him to perform this fire station location address checking routine. I can also, from an admin side, jump in and have a look at what users have submitted what jobs across different projects. We can set some people up to be supervisor users, so you can see how your teams are performing and have a look at what jobs are being run, what rules are failing the most time, so you can control what to fix first, as well as having all the usual sort of control over user access, security access, how you want to maybe implement some single sign-on routines and things like that. The final aspect that I like to show you on the whole rules-based theme of processing is just make you aware, as part of the platform, so all the different tools we have to help you build solutions. Not only is there the rules engine with 1Integrate, the portal application with One Data Gateway, but we also have a mobile solution that allows us to reuse all those rich rules we've been building, but take them out into the field on native devices, native mobile devices that can work online and offline. So in this mobile example, this is basically a mobile app we've built for an Android tablet. Here I'm going to log into the actual application and I'm going to start myself a job, which is where I'm going to use some data to go out in the field to fix things. So in this first instance, it's going to be a job based on some shapefile data. It's the same fire station data as we had before. So here, whilst I'm online, I'm going to go and grab all the data files that I need, create a job using those data files. So there you can see we're in an area of Philadelphia. And then on the top left, as you're looking at it, you can see that that data is being imported onto my device, so I can go and work in an offline mode should I need to. So once the data has been imported, one of the important things here is we can bring in the same business rules that we were designing and using before. There's features in the mobile app to switch different layers on and off and control things and different base map views. But one of the important bits is we can actually set the system up to always show us the valid state of the data. So here's the three problems that we noticed before. But here, I might need to be out in the field. I might need to use a mobile device to get in the field before I can decide how to correct the data. In this first example, I can then, whilst I'm in the field, edit the data, and you can see in the top right, the 3 warnings I had before have dropped down to 2. So we're automatically firing the business rules to check the data whilst we're in the field, so we can correct the information and get it right first time. Here we can see that moving the feature from the north building to the south has also put it into the correct fire station building. Then we've got one final error to fix, one problem fire station. In the field I can see, yep, the fire station building is the other side of the road. I can move that feature, but actually the business rule is still failing. And we did see that through the 1Integrate and the One Data Gateway experience. And here I actually need to be in the field to see that it's not the location information, but actually the location attribute thought it was on Market Street, but it's actually on 21st Street. And I need to make that edit in the field as well before the business rule now says, yep, that is a valid feature. So once I've made all my changes, I can save them away. And then if I was back online, then the data would sync with the SORC system and we complete the process. So thanks everyone for your attention. Really appreciate that. If you want to try out any of the products that I've been talking about, you can go onto the website and just put your details in and say, yeah, I'd like a trial. Like I mentioned before, there's no credit card details we need, no extra software going to ask you to install. We'll just ask you a couple of questions about what you're going to do with the software so we can size up the environment correctly and then give you access to everything that you need in the cloud. Shouldn't really need too much interruption with your IT departments or anything like that to get up and running either. But really, I've also hopefully given you some ideas around the ways we build things at 1Spatial and maybe some tips or techniques or ideas to think about as you build out your own software solutions back in your own organizations. So again, thanks very much. Enjoy the rest of the sessions and I'll catch you all soon. Cheers, bye.